Hi everyone, it's Fiona here from fionamarks.com, and I'm sneaking in a final Friday 5 with Fiona just before Christmas Day, the 25th of December, because I thought there were some really interesting astrological things to talk about. So let's get started. Let's touch on once again the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which I hope you got a chance to enjoy this last week. Then we're going to look at some Christmas astrology synergies. So first of all, we've got Solstice. Then I want to mention Easter a little bit, talk about hope, and finally send you some Christmas wishes. So as you remember from last week's newsletter, Saturn and Jupiter were very close in the sky on the 21st of December. Just crazy timing that on the shortest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, with the longest night, was actually also when Saturn and Jupiter came together. We were lucky enough where I was that it wasn't cloudy and you could see it really easily, even with street lights, and it was that bright. But it makes one think at this time of year whether something like that astrologically could have been part of that story, that if you grew up in a Christian background, you heard of the Star of Bethlehem leading these three wise men to the birth of Jesus. And obviously this is something that people have put a lot of time into researching, and there's controversy about what the astronomical event was that actually was the star. But it's nice when we have something as unusual as what we did have this week to imagine something similar happening in those times. And there was a Saturn and Jupiter conjunction around about that time, I think in 7 BC. And just like ours is now, it was also a change from one element to another. So our conjunction that we just had took place in Aquarius and air sign just now, when it has been taking place in earth signs for the last 200 years. And this particular one in 7 BC also changed, in this case, from air signs to water signs. So it took place in Pisces. So it's, I don't think maybe it's a mystery that we're ever going to solve, but it's good to reflect on how the heavens and looking up to the stars forms part of our storytelling, and the significant things that we see in the stars in earlier times. They were really omens for something, and led these three wise men, possibly astrologers, priests, to travel to see this great event, and to see if it would indeed mark the birth of the King of the Jews. So a link between now and the past. And of course, another astrological synergy between astrology and Christmas is that this is a celebration of solstice, because solstice happens on the 21st of December. We already mentioned it's the shortest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. Conversely, it's the longest day of sunlight in the Southern Hemisphere, where I was born. So it's quite a different feel. It's the midsummer. It's an extremely long day with lots of warm weather. And here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's so clearly a celebration, a festival of lights. Whereas in the Southern Hemisphere, we do all do that, but we have to wait quite a long time to turn on the lights because the sun's not going down until 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. So quite the opposite of here, where the Festival of Lights makes a lot of sense because, the streets become dark in the afternoon, and we have this chance to turn on lights early and really enjoy that we can have that symbol of hope available out there on the street for everyone to see, with these beautiful lights in the street. And it is a celebration of hope, because the solstice is all about, in the Northern Hemisphere at this time of year, that each day the day is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And obviously, if that were to continue forever, then all hope would be lost, all humanity would be lost, all vegetation would be lost. We can't survive without the sun's energy. And in times gone by, there would be that, fear of when is this going to turn around? When is this going to change? Or why is it that the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter? And so when we began to notice the sun actually is staying a little longer in the sky, the days getting longer, it was such a sign of hope that we've gotten through the hardest part, and now every day is getting closer to that, to the fertility of nature, to the ability to reproduce and to grow and to have food and to have animals. So this turning point where the sun stays a little bit longer in the sky, or stops before, it doesn't get shorter anymore, would have been a really important turning point. And for me, I was raised in a Christian background, in that I went to a Catholic school for my kindergarten and first grade education, and I remember really being immersed in the stories of Christianity, as you are when you're a young child. But even as a young child, I really got mixed up between Christmas and Easter, because and you've already heard that I was born in the Southern Hemisphere, so you get mixed up between the winter solstice stories of Christmas and the summer solstice that you're actually experiencing. So this is part of my dysphoria. It was also having a mix up between Christmas and Easter, because to me, the birth of Jesus always seems like a spring story, right? Because, birth and spring kind of go together. And yet it's happening in the middle of winter, according to the way it's told, if it's a Christmas story. And then Easter is such a celebration of hope, because Easter we celebrate in spring and all of those green shoots are coming up, and it's the new year in the Northern Hemisphere. And we have in this Easter story the idea that Jesus is on the cross and put into the resting mausoleum or the cave, whatever it is, and that after 3 days the sun rises, which is, to me, sounds like solstice, right? That the sun really slows down as we get close to that lowest point or highest point, depending on where you are on the planet. That originally you're losing 1 minute a day of sunlight, and then 30 seconds a day, and then 10 seconds. And then right at the end, as we get to that solstice turnaround point, you're just losing 1 second of sunlight a day. And it feels like the day length stays still, and then it begins to rise again. So I feel like this is a metaphor for the Easter story of Jesus coming out of the cave. And I also think that when we look at the hero's journey, that you guys will have seen in my Rahu K2 video, where the zodiac signs are telling this numerology of a hero's journey, we can imagine that going through the 8th sign of Scorpio, one of the things we say is that someone becomes friends with all, because in Scorpio we're in the darkest caves, we're in our psychological challenges and all of our psychoses. But when we come through Scorpio, we realize we've navigated those caves. There is nothing to fear any longer, and we come out friends with all, because nothing to fear. And we come into Sagittarius, the 9th sign of wisdom. This seems to me, this meal of the disciples fits really nicely with the Sagittarius, and with the Thanksgiving happening in Sagittarius. But then the betrayed by Judas thing maybe is that Saturn energy of fear. I don't know all of my Christian stories, but that idea that he was a disciple that was, really pressured and felt for his own life and betrayed the location of Jesus, speaks perhaps to Saturn and its lameness and weakness and fear. And that's when, just as the sun enters Capricorn, is the 21st of December, and Christmas the 25th. So for me, I always mix up Easter and Christmas stories, because astrologically, or the time of the year, seems to me that the Easter story of Jesus has got these elements that relate to the hero's journey of the December time of year, because the sun coming into Capricorn, Capricorn ruled by Saturn. It's such hard work in Capricorn, facing one's karma, the stations of the cross, you know, carrying that cross through the streets. That to me just is such Capricorn energy. And then the Aquarius and Pisces of transcending, of giving back to the community, bringing all the joy and love, and then transcending into the clouds. So I always mix up Easter and Christmas. I wonder whether you do that too and what you think of that mythology. There is just a little snippet of how much of the sun staying still. This is from a city right, Udaipur, right on the Tropic of Cancer. And as you see, we're really, to the naked eye, it seems as if the sun stays still around that solstice time, and then afterwards begins to pick up the pace, and the days get longer again. So just wanted to add that for the sun comes out after 3 days. And another thing that I think is important to take from the Christmas story and from astrology is that hope comes first. You know, the days start getting longer after the 22nd of December, but our weather doesn't catch up until March if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Other way around, the days start getting longer from June, but it doesn't start to warm up in the Southern Hemisphere perhaps until September, do we get that warm weather coming through. So it's good to remember when making changes in your own life that the change, the hope, the inspiration, the light, that comes first. But you may not feel the manifestation of those changes for quite some weeks after you make that commitment. So do not be deterred. And finally, some warm wishes for you this Christmas season. It's a very different season here for us, where I am in Portugal, just everyone keeping a little bit more to their nuclear families and keeping a little bit more indoors. So warm wishes to you all. I hope that you experience hope for this season. And it's good to remember that Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn, where the sun is now. If you think of other astrology synergies, you know, we have the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 houses, and we've got the 12 apostles, right? So the sun is moving through all of these 12 stations through the year. Right now it's in Capricorn, where Jupiter, its disciple Jupiter, is debilitated. And Jupiter is this wise, generous abundance. And this is why gift giving is such a wonderful thing that we all partake in at this time of year, to stimulate our Jupiter that is naturally a little low when in Capricorn, and the sun is right there now. So it's a good chance to think about being generous and abundant. And in this year, that might challenge us to be generous and abundant with our time, and with our presence on Zoom with each other. We have to be creative. It might not be about giving stuff or making food for each other this year, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the chance to open our hearts, which is what is such a challenge for Jupiter when it's in Capricorn. So I wish you a heart-opening sense of connection and hope, and I look forward to seeing you in my next Friday 5. Okay, until then, goodbye, stay well.